Hello and welcome. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for stronger ties with Vietnam as the two nations sign dozens of cooperation agreements. Xi is in Hanoi amid heightening trade tensions with the US following Trump's tariffs. Meanwhile, President Trump has said he will announce tariffs on semiconductors over the next week. Trump also revealed that the tariff exclusions on smartphones and computers will likely be short-lived. Russia has accused Kyiv of using civilians as human shields as it reacts to strikes in Sumy, which killed at least 34 people. Russia's defense ministry says that 2 Iskander missiles were fired at only military targets, following broad condemnation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Donald Trump to visit his nation ahead of any ceasefire deal. Zelensky made the comments in a CBS interview that was filmed before the Sumy strikes. Yemen's Houthis say that US strikes have killed 7 people and left dozens injured. Almost daily US strikes have been reported for the last month as the US responds to attacks on Red Sea shipping. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi will visit Russia this week prior to a second round of talks with the United States over a nuclear deal. A meeting scheduled to take place in Rome on Saturday follows a meet in Oman over the weekend. Further Israeli military action has been reported following a strike on a Gaza hospital, where a child died, according to the World Health Organization. Fighting in the enclave comes amid negotiations on a hostage release deal. The criminal trial of impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has started. The former leader faces life imprisonment or potentially the death penalty if he is found guilty following his short-lived martial law imposition. We start off in the Indo-Pacific, and in a major diplomatic outreach, Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Vietnam, marking the start of a key 3-nation Southeast Asia tour. Xi attended in Hanoi the signing of dozens of cooperation agreements between the two nations, including deals on enhancing supply chains and on cooperation over railways. One memorandum of understanding signed on Monday is to boost cooperation between the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade and the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which issues certificates on the origins of goods. Vietnam is a major industrial and assembly hub in Southeast Asia. Most of its imports are from China, while the United States is its main export market. The country is a crucial source of electronics, shoes and apparel for the United States. The Chinese leader's visit comes at a time of rising global trade tensions, especially with the United States. In a strong message aimed at Washington, Xi warned that protectionism leads to nowhere and that trade wars have no winners, which is a clear swipe at US tariffs under President Donald Trump. Xi is calling for stronger trade and supply chain cooperation with Vietnam, even as both countries navigate pressure from US duties. He's also urging deeper collaboration in green technology and artificial intelligence. The Chinese leader emphasized that China and Vietnam should resolve maritime disputes through dialogue and negotiation amid long-standing tensions in the South China Sea. Xi also said he's looking forward to in-depth strategic discussions with Vietnamese leaders on bilateral ties and broader regional issues. From Vietnam, Xi will travel to Malaysia and Cambodia. Well, joining us to discuss these topics in more depth is Andrew K.P. Leung, an independent China strategist who is joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much, as always, for joining us. I want to first look at this meeting that's taken place and these deals that have been signed. How significant are they in the face of the growing trade tensions after Donald Trump's US tariffs?
Well, I think that first of all, we've got, rather than looking at the details of these deals, one needs to look at this initiative by President Xi to visit a Southeast Asian country at a time when the United States is imposing tariffs all over the world, including on the very country President Xi is visiting, Vietnam. In fact, in the three countries President Xi is visiting, Vietnam is suffering from 46% tariffs from the United States, Cambodia 49%, Malaysia 24%. But of course, China, of course, is shouldering a much higher tariffs. But then the irony is that China's export, for example, to the Global South, including Southeast Asian countries, and also, of course, including countries in Africa, Latin America, already exceeds the grand total of all China's exports to the G7 countries combined. So I think that this is the reality. It seems that Trump administration is shutting its eyes to, thinking it could use coercion or tariffs to bend countries to its will. And in fact, not only China, but Southeast Asia and other countries, even Americans' allies in Europe or Canada for that matter, are also recalibrating or hedging their bets with at least the second largest economy of the world and a huge consumer market and a relatively more stable relationship compared with the unpredictable and coercive and bullying kind of behavior displayed by President Trump. So I think that the visit reflects this kind of perspective, whereas President Trump expects all the countries lined up to kiss his ring or to kiss his A, pardon the expression, because they are smaller countries. But China is the second largest economy in the world. President Xi himself was the top leader visiting a smaller country. And so that this is a demonstration showing the world that China doesn't stand on high horses and would like to develop cooperative, mutually beneficial relationship with the rest of the world. This is particularly more important when President Trump is using the wrecking ball of this coercive bullying tariff tactics against the rest of the world.
Yes, Sandra, I want to build on that hierarchy that you mentioned there. Of course, China, the world's second largest economy. Given the fact that for China only around 2% of their GDP is created from exports to the United States, do you think these tariffs that Trump is placing on other countries could in fact boost China's economy if they're able to sign deals and get trade agreements in place with countries who are formerly dealing with the United States?
Well, it really depends on which countries. I mean, not all countries are on all fours. Some smaller countries, and they have only one commodity, and they may well depend on the United States market to a much greater extent. For example, the example of Madagascar, for example, is suffering huge tariffs from the United States. There's no way that a small country like Madagascar can balance its trade because it's selling vanilla and certain apparel products and certain agricultural products, and then the GDP per capita is only less than 1.5 US dollars a day. How can such a poor country balance its trade with the United States, buying its Boeing aircraft or even a Tesla car? But China is quite different. Of course, as I said, China exports more to the global south than the rest of the developed countries combined. All the G7 countries and other developed countries combined, it's a smaller amount of export compared with China's export to the global south. So China is in a much better position, a more confident position to counteract Trump's tariffs war on the world. But I think Vietnam also important in a sense that it is in a part and parcel of China's Belt and Road Initiative. It is a part of the China's Maritime Silk Road, as well as its overland economic corridors.
Yes, Andrew, I'm really sorry to cut you off. We are running short on time. I just want to ask you a quick question on the tariffs that we know that are hanging over the head of China, those up to 145% levies. In your opinion, do you think Xi should be spending time in Southeast Asia, or should he be on the phone to Donald Trump trying to get that sorted?
Basically, I mean, China doesn't care about the United States anymore. When the tariff level is exceeding something like 120%, even if you increase to 1,000%, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter anymore. There's no business that can be done at such high level. So that's why President Xi make it quite clear in response to the latest tariff hikes, saying that, well, of course we need to retaliate because China is a sovereign country. We need to defend our rights. But beyond a certain level, China make it quite clear and openly saying so that China would not respond to further hikes because these are just a number game. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Andrew, KP, Liang, unfortunately we are out of time. Thank you very much for being with us and providing your insight. We do now bring you some updates from the Russia-Ukraine war, and the Kremlin has defended its latest strike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy, claiming it only targets military sites. This comes as Ukraine accuses Russia of killing 34 and injuring over 100 in a missile attack on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Kremlin confirmed that President Putin met US envoy Steve Witkoff in St. Petersburg last week. While the talks were called useful, there was no serious discussion about a possible Trump-Putin meeting. The Kremlin also said it expects US sanctions to remain in place under President Donald Trump. We now head back to tariffs, and President Donald Trump has announced that new tariffs on semiconductors will be revealed within the next week. These tariffs follow a series of similar measures targeting steel, aluminium and automobiles. Trump stated that no one would be exempt from the tariffs, insisting nobody is getting off the hook. Meanwhile, the US has warned that recent tariff exemptions on tech products, including smartphones and laptops, may not last that long. Despite the brief reprieve, Trump emphasized that these products remain subject to a 20% tariff. Let's hear what Trump had to say.
That's right, but the tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future.
We can't be beholden and rely upon foreign countries for fundamental things that we need. We can't be relying on China for fundamental things that we need. Our medicines and our semiconductors need to be built in America. Donald Trump is on it. He's calling that out. So you should understand these are included in the semiconductor tariffs that are coming, and the pharmaceuticals are coming. Those two areas are coming in the next month or two. So this is not like a permanent sort of exemption. He's just clarifying that these are not available to be negotiated away by countries. These are things that are national security that we need to be made in.
Well, in response, China urged the US to end its aggressive tariff strategy. The US Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, confirmed that semiconductor tariffs could be coming in the next 1 or 2 months, highlighting the need for America to reduce its reliance on China for critical resources like semiconductors. Well, joining us to discuss this development is Aaron Mapazi, a semiconductor professional and author. Thank you very much for being here with us, Aaron. We want to look first, with your expertise, at why this potential tariff on semiconductors could be so devastating to the global economy.
Yeah, hi, Joshua. let me just backtrack a little bit. What it appears is that US is classifying these tariffs into two kinds. One is the reciprocal tariffs, which has different rates for different countries but applies across sectors. And now, as the secretary said, sectorial tariffs, like for automotives, like for pharmaceuticals that are coming up, and for semiconductors. As you rightly said, probably going to come within the next 1 or 2 months. And I think President Trump said that he is going to have an update by next Monday. So maybe we'll get some hints of what it means. But overall, if it goes the same way as the automotive tariffs, country independent and so on, then it is going to take a huge hit on the prices of chips and so on, which goes into everything that is electronic. And the aim that the US seems to have is to try to bring onshore as much as manufacturing as possible for semiconductors also, because of not just its strategic importance. I would tend to think also its commercial importance, because right now it's a 600 billion market. By 2030, it is supposed to go over $1 trillion market. So it is going to take a hit if what we hear from Trump is going to happen. For example, right now, the packaging of the chips, China holds about 30% of the market share, Taiwan about 28%. US does very little of it. The big question, though, that is going to be there is, after these tariffs also, is it, because some of these are very labor intensive, and there are some studies which showed that it's almost 10 or 20 times the labor cost in US compared to countries like China or the others in the Southeast Asia. Are they going to offset? Are they doing all these calculations in depth, and is it why it's taking time? So time will tell us that.
Yeah, Saran, we know that Donald Trump's tariffs, one big reason for them is he wants things to be now built in the United States, with conversations going on with businesses like TSMC. Do you think that this tariff will help towards that, or is it just going to ostracize the US, given the fact that it will have such an impact potentially to the costs of these goods when they get to the consumer?
Well, if you're aware, he did openly say, for example, TSMC, if you look back at what happens to TSMC, which is the biggest semiconductor chip manufacturing or chip fabricating foundry in the world, during Biden's time, the talk was all about, we would like you to come and set up a factory in the US so that we have the most advanced nodes being built in the US, also in addition to Taiwan. But then come Trump, the talk became a little bit more, specific in terms of you either build it here or you get taxed. So now, when it comes to TSMC, it is about fabricating the chips, and most of it, what they're trying to do in the US is the most advanced node chips. But what now it appears, what Trump says, blanket semiconductor tariffs, that could also be for each and every kind of chips, whether it's the advanced nodes or the mature nodes. And much of those is, as I said, it's not just about the fabrication. It is also the last mile where the chip gets fabricated. And India, for example, is now just picking up on that particular aspect, where we are building many more chip packaging facilities that are upcoming, what is called as OSATs. The question now becomes, is it going to, and these are outsourced mainly because they are the labor intensive part. The fabrication part is a lot automated. It may not save much time, it may not save much cost to outsource it, and it's still, US is still good with fabrication. It still holds a good amount of percentage in terms of how much wafers are fabricated in US, though it's been declining over the years. So Trump wants to boost it back as well. But much more than that, the last mile packaging of the chips, which the US has gone into negligible or very little percentage of the market share, is he really going to try to capture that also back into the US? And if he tries doing that, that is going to have a huge impact, much more than what I would think of him trying to get semiconductor fabrication facilities back into the US. So it's something that we'll have to wait and see what is the kind of rules and regulations that he's going to put. Is he going to distinguish where the chip gets fabricated? China, for example, has this rule that they want to call the country of origin of the chip as to where it gets fabricated, not really where it gets packaged. That's some of the reason news suggests so. Is US also going to take a similar stand, or are they going to take a stand that if it gets packaged in China, it's a Chinese chip, immaterial of whether it was actually designed or fabricated in the US? And that's happens a lot. Companies like Texas Instruments or ST Microelectronics or European and US countries, they outsource the last mile packaging into Southeast Asia and hopefully soon to India also. And if Trump is going to call those also as chips which are made outside US and hence subject to big tariffs, then it is going to be quite a doomsday in terms of the pricing of semiconductors. And so subsequently for all the downstream electronics as well.
Aaron, thank you ever so much for joining us and explaining this often complex topic. The tariff conversation will continue and we will be here providing you all of those updates. We now move on to the Middle East, and Yemen's Houthi rebels reported that US airstrikes in the Bani Mata region west of Sana'a have killed 7 and injured 29, including children and women. The attacks targeted a factory and nearby homes. US strikes have been frequent since March the 15th, following Houthi threats to vessels in vital maritime routes, including the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The rebels also targeted US ships and Israel. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have launched 2 ballistic missiles towards Israel, aiming at a military base near Ashdod and Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv. According to Israeli officials, 1 missile was fired from Yemen but was successfully intercepted. Air raid sirens sounded in various parts of the country, including Jerusalem, though no casualties or damage were reported. The Houthis have been carrying out missile and drone attacks on Israel since the war with Gaza began in October, saying they are acting in solidarity with Palestinians. These attacks paused during the ceasefire in January but resumed when Israel relaunched its military operations in March. Meanwhile, the US began targeting Houthi positions in March after the group escalated attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. These assaults have significantly disrupted maritime traffic along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, forcing many ships to reroute through longer and more costly paths. Here is what a Houthi military spokesperson has said.
غزة نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية، وذلك بصاروخين باليستيين أحدهما فرط صوتي نوع فلسطين 2 استهدف قاعدة سودة ميخا في منطقة شرق أسدود المحتلة، وهي قاعدة صاروخية لإطلاق صواريخ أريحة وبطاريات صواريخ حيدز. والصاروخ الآخر نوع ذي الفقار استهدف مطار بن غوريون في منطقة يافا المحتلة
Well, joining us to discuss the latest US action and the reason why is Adnan Nasser, a news correspondent who's joining us from Beirut in Lebanon. Thank you very much, Adnan, for being here with us today. I want to look firstly at these continued strikes from the US targeting the Yemen Houthi rebels. In your opinion, is this a decent amount of action given the Houthi strikes that we've seen, or do you think it's disproportionate given the loss to civilian life that's being reported from within Yemen?
Well, I'm not sure that this is the strategy that will win the hearts and minds of the Yemeni people, if this is something that President Donald Trump is trying to do, nor is it effective on the military status. Keep something in mind. I think that the American position is to use the bombing in Yemen and on the Houthi targets as leverage in negotiations with Iran on the nuclear topic and Iran's regional influence, particularly in Yemen. These talks are being held now, as you know, nuclear discussion in Oman, next door to Yemen. So everyone in the region has an incentive to make sure that the talks go successfully and they're smooth and they produce the kind of result that leads to cessation of violence. The Houthis they had made it clear that part of what has resumed their bombing, the bombing of it on Israel and Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, is Israel's resumption of violence and the military campaign in Gaza. So the moment that the Israelis stop attacking Palestinian people in Gaza is the moment that the Houthis will cease hostilities towards the Israelis, and this will more than likely lead to a de-escalation on the part of the United States.
Yes, Adnan, you mentioned there, of course, the ongoing war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. The Houthis, as you've said, of course, striking Israel in solidarity with Palestinians. But the picture's slightly different, of course, in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, given the fact that it's such a vital shipping route for global trade. Do you think that would stop as well if a ceasefire deal was agreed?
As your question is, if there was a ceasefire in Gaza, would there be a ceasefire in Yemen, in the Red Sea?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. I think that you would see a cessation of Houthi military action on the shipping and trade routes in the Red Sea. I mean, this is something that is important for all global trade and consumers. You have to remember, if there's a cessation of trade or easy access for goods being shipped through the Red Sea, this will increase prices for consumers, which is something that nobody really wants. But the Houthis have kept this, they know what they're doing, and that's why they're preventing their attacks. Their attacks are focused on American and what they deem are pro-Israel shipping. So for now, as far as I know, they're not attacking Russian shipping. They're not attacking shipping from the Chinese. Still, more than likely, we will see an end to the attacks on the shipping routes if there was an end to the killing in Gaza.
Adnan, to bring an end to this discussion, you mentioned Iran there and the ongoing nuclear talks. Of course, Iran have been backing the Houthis, also backing Hamas, also backing Hezbollah. What part do Iran have to play in these attacks on Red Sea shipping and attacks on Israel as well? Should they be doing more to stop these as they work towards diplomacy over nuclear deals with the United States?
Well, keep something in mind. You said this. The Houthis have also said publicly that they don't belong to any nation in the region, that they're an independent actor, that they represent the will of the Yemeni people, which is expressing solidarity with the Palestinians. However, Iran has significant and incredible influence over the Houthis as the one main party defending and supporting the Houthis. Now, they have never openly declared that they're supporting the Houthis militarily, but it's an open secret that the Iranians are backing the Houthis politically, backing them militarily, giving them the means to produce weapons in Yemen itself. So if there was a successful nuclear agreement, a new nuclear agreement between the new administration of Donald Trump and the Iranian leadership, that may fall into place in getting the Houthis in line with stopping their attacks on Israel. But they would also want, I believe, the Iranians are going to leverage every influence that they can muster in making sure there's a ceasefire in Gaza. So they want a package deal that includes regional developments plus the nuclear agreement with the United States.
Yes, Adnan Nasser, thank you very much for joining us and discussing those developments in the Middle East. We have some more developments and some breaking news coming to us. The White House is making significant progress in tariff talks with the European Union, according to Kevin Hassett, director of the US National Economic Council. Speaking to Fox Business, Hassett emphasised that there are no expectations of a recession and confirmed that rare earth limits are being closely studied. He also noted that growing concerns about China's economic impact. Well, with that breaking news, that is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more of the latest from across the world very soon.